And we are joined now by NDP member of provincial parliament, Peter Tabuns, who was, of course, Jack's provincial counterpart in Toronto Danforth. But Peter has known Jack a lot longer than that, going all the way back to Toronto City Council. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Joel. Thanks for having me on today.
It is a real pleasure and a treat to have you here. Peter, do you remember the first time you met Jack?
In fact, I do. I was making a deputation before the City of Toronto Board of Health with a bunch of other folks from the south end of Riverdale. We were fighting against a garbage incinerator. Jack was on the Board of Health, and he was incredible because he understood exactly what we were talking about and was such a forceful advocate at the board for advancing what we were asking, that an incinerator be shut down and that another one not be built in the community. So for us, for me, it was quite amazing to see him in action. I'd seen him on television, I'd read about him in the papers, but I'd never really seen him doing his thing in council, in a city committee itself.
Why do you think, in particular, there was such an amazing outpouring publicly after Jack's passing? I mean, we knew Jack was popular, but I personally was just really touched and kind of overwhelmed by the tributes in Nathan Phillips Square. And why was that public outpouring so marked after Jack's passing?
Well, I think he had stirred great hope in people's hearts right across Canada. He had worked hard in Toronto for decades, but across Canada for almost 10 years to build a coalition of movement for a different kind of politics, for a new opportunity for the people of this country. People saw him take on incredible adversity, dealing with illness, taking his campaign from one end of Canada to the other on his cane. They knew that he was fighting through disease, and he spoke very clearly about how he was fighting for all of us. And I think people saw that incredible strength and heroism in the face of pain and challenge, heard his message of hope coming loud and clear through that, and had had a number of years to get used to him as a person. And people really developed a great affection for him because they felt that he was on their side, and it is not often that people feel that a national leader, a politician, really is standing up for them. And so when you take all those things together, his strength, his heroism, his message, his personality, and then you combine it with this extraordinary loss of someone who had taken us so far at what would have been a jumping-off point for a whole new round of change in this country. I think it touched people very deeply on a human level, on a personal level, a political level. Every which way, people felt that emotional wave move through them.
Peter, I wonder if you could share with us, maybe as you've gone through this week, some of your more personal memories, but both maybe a personal memory of the public Jack Layton that you've gotten to know over the years and the many political fights, but also of Jack more privately or more personally, that a side of him maybe that you've seen that others haven't seen.
Well, I would say if you've seen him in public, you've seen him in private. But anyway, there was not this big gulf between the two personalities. I would say in public, watching him address people at political rallies and just reaching into himself for the emotion, for the thoughts that he knew would matter to people. Watched him in the 2005 campaign speak to a rally in Toronto and just get the whole room excited because his excitement was so contagious. His hope for where we could go was so contagious. And his ability to do that, something rare amongst all of us, was so impressive to see. But I also saw, and people would know that Jack represents Toronto Danforth riding, and I've had a chance to talk a bit about this anecdote. Once a year we have the Taste of the Danforth. The street is closed down. Hundreds of thousands, I think they've hit 1 million people, come to the Danforth, sample all the different foods, get a sense of the neighborhood, and Jack was entirely at his element, talking to people, greeting people, just standing there, talking to all comers about whatever question they had. But at the end of the day, Joel, a bunch of us would go to one of the restaurants on the Danforth. Palace is one that I have the most recent memories of. And we'd all sit around big table. The owners would bring out hors d'oeuvres and some lamb and some wine, and we'd all just talk about what had happened that day. And in a smaller group, Jack's love of being alive, his enjoyment of the people around him, his enjoyment just of having had the opportunity to talk to so many people, just came shining through. So that enthusiasm and energy that you saw on a public stage, you would find in person, close up in a smaller group. And his energy and delight always had an impact on everyone at the table as well. He was a great storyteller, I should add, and that certainly added to the enjoyment of being around him.
And Peter, maybe you've already touched on this when you talk about how Jack was a great storyteller, but the thing that really I noticed when I went down to Nathan Phillips Square and saw those chalk tributes to Jack was just the number of languages in which those tributes were written in, and that Jack seemed to have been able to have connected with Canadians from every walk of life, from every demographic group, new Canadians whose families have been here for generations and generations. How was it that Jack was able to make that elusive connection that so many politicians hope for, but most fail at making with such a broad range of people?
I would say the fact that he took to people, listened to them, tried the best he could to understand what was on their mind and to talk to them in a way that showed that he really understood and connected. Allowed him to talk to people in all walks of life, in all ages, and all ethnic groups, far more comfortably than those who don't necessarily have the gift of listening and hearing closely. And because he did do that and engage people in real conversation about what mattered to them, because he spoke French, some Cantonese, was picking up a sprinkling of Mandarin, had words in a variety of languages, Tamil, Greek. He always was able to make a connection beyond just a simple, how you doing? He was actually able to talk about what mattered to people and give enough words in people's languages that they knew that he'd listened to who they were and had spent the time to be able to connect with them more closely.
Peter, out of all of the tributes, all of the things of the past 2 weeks, that Nathan Phillips Square and those remarkable chalk tributes, Jack's actual funeral, the tributes on Parliament Hill, Mike and Sarah's really brave and wonderful eulogy, what moment resonates most powerfully for you on a personal level as you remember Jack Layton?
Well, Joel, I would say the last paragraph of his letter, which I saw on a television screen when I was doing an interview at CBC, and we were told this was early the Monday of the day that he died, that his full letter was going to be released later in the day. But that paragraph about love being greater than hate, hope being greater than fear, optimism greater than despair. I was sitting there getting ready for an interview, and I thought, what an extraordinary way to put his personality into a paragraph. Joel, for everyone who's listening and for everyone who has done work to try and improve their community or their city or their country, there are a lot of lessons that we learn as we go through, and I think Jack distilled it into that paragraph because he was right. If you spend all your time on hate, then frankly you lose the point. You get caught up in an emotion that won't actually allow you to build something. But if you focus on what you love and build connections between people, then you actually can build a movement, build a community, build a society. If you give in to despair, then again you'll be paralyzed. You will not actually be able to do anything. But if you have hope, then you'll have the energy to address what has to be addressed and build the vision of where we have to go. And so that the hope piece is very critical, again, to making a difference in a society. The optimism being the greater is also really critical, because if you don't have optimism, then there's no point in doing anything. Often the challenges we face are so daunting that unless you see the best outcome, unless you see what the opportunities are, you will do nothing. And I was talking this morning to the executive at the hotel workers who are engaged in very ambitious work to try and better the lives of a large segment of the population that's trying to live on minimum wage, facing very difficult conditions. If we have that love, that hope, and that optimism, then we can keep our own strength and mobilize the strength of others to make a difference in the world around us. And that's what Jack had been doing for decades. And to have summarized decades of lessons in one paragraph is quite extraordinary to me. And I think having seen that first on that television screen, getting ready for an interview, and then having read the whole letter, may be amongst the greatest gifts that he left us.
A remarkable gift, the letter. Peter, 30 years from now, when historians look back on this period and look back on Jack's entire career, what do you think his legacy will be when they write it 30 years from now?
Well, I would say there are a few things that are striking to me. One is that there are few who have provoked such hope and affection in Canada, and I think that will be remembered. I think the bridge he built between English-speaking Canada and Francophone Canada will be remembered. The Conservatives built a bridge that collapsed. The Liberals built a bridge which collapsed. Jack built a bridge setting aside all of the fights that we've gone through in this country for a long time and said, what are the common interests between Quebec and the rest of Canada? And those interests are a strong social safety net, a strong society where equity and caring for one another help build the future for all of us. And I think to the extent that he has strengthened the country and built a bridge, that will be remembered. And I think his extraordinary work in taking the NDP from fourth party in the Commons to official opposition, something that has not been matched in the history of the NDP or the CCF in this country, will in and of itself be worthy of comment. In this country we have Medicare, public health care, because the NDP first fought for it, and then posed enough of an electoral threat that the Liberals were moved to make it national. The work that we've done has changed Canada in many ways, and what Jack did was set the stage for resisting the drift to the right that we've seen in the United States and in so many places across Canada. And I think he set the stage for a party that we hope will take government and that will address so many of the pressing needs we have in this country, healthcare, the environment, good cities, and a decent standard of living that people are yearning for.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Peter, and thank you for sharing your memories and also your hope for Jack's legacy.
Thank you very much, Joel. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Have a wonderful morning.
You too.
And that was Peter Tabuns, who joined us. He's, of course, the member of provincial parliament in Toronto, Danforth.